James and William Thompson pushed open the heavy glass doors of Royal Motorcycles, their hearts racing with excitement. The 17 and 16-year-old brothers had been planning this surprise for weeks, carefully saving every penny of their pocket money. Their father's birthday was coming soon, and they wanted to learn about his dream motorcycle to make his day special. The dealership was the most beautiful place they had ever seen. Shiny motorcycles lined the polished floor like jewels in a crown. The lights made everything sparkle, and the smell of new leather and metal filled the air. James adjusted his favorite blue hoodie, while William smoothed down his school tracksuit. They felt a bit nervous, but mostly excited about their secret mission. "This place is amazing," William whispered to his brother as they walked deeper into the showroom. "Dad is going to love hearing about these bikes. Look at this one," James said, stopping in front of a beautiful red motorcycle that gleamed under the bright lights. "Dad would love this color. Remember how he always talks about red cars?" The boys moved closer to examine the bike, their faces full of wonder. They had never seen anything so perfect. The chrome sparkled like mirrors, and the leather seat looked softer than their sofa at home. William pulled out a small notebook where he had written down questions to ask about different motorcycles, but something strange was happening round them. The busy chatter of the dealership had grown quiet. James looked up and noticed that several salespeople had stopped their conversations and were staring at them. A woman behind the counter leaned over to whisper something to her colleague, pointing in their direction with a quick gesture. "Why is everyone looking at us?" William asked quietly, feeling uncomfortable under their stares. "I don't know," James replied, trying to ignore the feeling that something was wrong. "Maybe they're just curious about new customers." The brothers continued exploring the showroom, but the feeling of being watched never went away. Everywhere they went, eyes followed them. Conversations stopped when they approached. Some people even moved away when they got too close, as if the boys were dangerous. A tall man in an expensive dark suit walked toward them with slow, deliberate steps. His face was serious, and his eyes were cold. The name tag on his jacket read, "Manager, Robert Smith." He stopped directly in front of the boys, crossing his arms over his chest. "Can I help you, boys?" he asked. But his tone made it clear that he did not want to help them at all. His voice was sharpened and friendly, like a teacher catching students doing something wrong. James straightened up and tried to sound confident. "Yes, sir. We're looking at motorcycles for our father. Could you tell us about financing options and different models?" Robert's face twisted into an ugly smirk. He looked the boys up and down again, taking in their casual clothes and young faces. "Son, these bikes cost more than most people make in a year. They're definitely not in your price range." The words hit James like a slap. He felt his cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. Other customers had turned to watch the conversation, and their stares made everything worse. William felt his stomach twist into knots as he realized they were being judged not for what they had done, but for how they looked. "Maybe you should try the used car lot down the street," Robert continued, his voice getting louder so that everyone could hear. "This is a serious business for serious buyers only." The brothers looked at each other, their excitement completely gone. Confusion and hurt filled their eyes. They had done nothing wrong. They had been polite and respectful. They had genuine questions about motorcycles, yet they were being treated like they had committed a crime. James tried one more time. "Sir, we really are interested in learning about motorcycles for our father. We have been saving money and I think it's time for you to leave." Robert interrupted loudly, making sure his voice carried across the entire showroom. "We have a strict no loitering policy here. The words "no loitering" echoed through the dealership. Several people turned to stare more openly now. Some shook their heads in disapproval. But James wasn't sure if they disapproved of the boys or of Robert's behavior. With heavy hearts and faces burning with shame, James and William walked slowly toward the exit. Behind them, they could hear whispers and even some quiet laughter. The day that was supposed to be about love and family had turned into something painful and confusing. As they stepped back onto the street, the cool air hit their hot faces. They walked home in complete silence, both brothers wondering why they had been treated so differently from the other customers. All they had wanted was to make their father happy. The warm smell of roast chicken filled the Thompson family kitchen. As David sat down at the dinner table, his wife Mary had prepared his favorite meal. Complete with mashed potatoes and green beans, the table was set with their best dishes, and candles flickered softly in the center. It should have been a perfect family dinner, but David could sense something was wrong. James and William sat across from him, but they were not their usual cheerful selves. James kept pushing his food around his plate without eating much. William stared down at his dinner, lost in deep thought. Neither boy was talking, which was very unusual for them. "How was your day?" "Boys," David asked gently, trying to sound casual. He took a bite of chicken, but kept his eyes on his sons. James looked up quickly at William, and they shared a meaningful glance. David noticed this silent communication between his sons. They seemed to be having a conversation without words, deciding whether to say something or keep quiet. "It was okay, Dad," James said quietly, but his voice lacked its usual energy. He went back to moving food around his plate without eating. David Thompson had not built his successful technology company from nothing without learning how to read people. He could see pain in his son's eyes, the kind of hurt that comes from being treated unfairly. Their shoulders were slumped, and they avoided looking directly at him. "Something's bothering you both," David said, setting down his fork and giving them his full attention. "What happened today?" Mary stopped eating and looked concerned. She could also sense that something was wrong with her boys. The usual dinner conversation about school, friends, and weekend plans was missing. Instead, there was a heavy silence that filled the room. James and William exchanged another look. They had been debating all afternoon whether to tell their father about what happened at the motorcycle dealership. They did not want to upset him or make him angry, but the hurt was too heavy to carry alone, and it was affecting everything they did. "We went to look at motorcycles today," William said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's nice," David said, encouraging him to continue. "For my birthday surprise, right?" William nodded, but his eyes filled with tears. "We went to Royal Motorcycles, the big dealership in town." After more gentle encouragement from their father, William finally found the courage to speak. His voice shook as he told the story of their visit. He described how everyone stared at them the moment they walked in. He explained how the salespeople whispered and pointed at them. He told his father about the manager who looked at them with cold and friendly eyes. "The manager said the motorcycles were not in our price range." William continued, his voice getting stronger as he spoke. "He told us to leave and go to a used car lot instead. He said they had a no-loitering policy." James added details about how other customers watched them being embarrassed. He described the whispers and quiet laughter as they walked out. Both boys felt the shame and confusion all over again as they told their story. David listened, without interrupting. His jaw tightened slightly, and Mary could see anger building in his eyes. But he remained calm and let his sons finish their story. When William was done talking, the room became very quiet, only the ticking of the kitchen clock could be heard. "I'm sorry that happened to you," David said softly, his voice full of love and understanding. "I know exactly how that feels." The boys looked up at their father with surprise. They had never heard him talk about experiencing discrimination before. David began to share his own stories from growing up. He told them about being followed in shops by security guards who thought he might steal something. He described times when people questioned him when he wore nice clothes, as if he could not afford them. He explained how he had been dismissed by people who judged him before knowing him. "I remember walking into a bank once, wearing my best suit, and the manager assumed I was there to open a basic account," David said. "He was shocked when I told him I wanted to discuss a business loan from my company. But here's what I learned," David continued, his voice becoming stronger. "Other people's ignorance says nothing about your worth. It only shows their own limitations and fears. But it hurt." "Dad," James said, his voice breaking slightly. "It hurt so much." "I know it did," David replied, reaching across the table to squeeze his son's hand. "That's okay. Feel that hurt, remember it, then decide what you're going to do with it." David had already made his decision. Tomorrow, he would teach his son something important about dignity, respect, and the responsibility that comes with success. He would show them that the best response to ignorance is education, and the strongest answer to discrimination is positive action. The next morning, David Thompson stood in front of his closet and chose his most ordinary clothes. He put on a simple grey t-shirt and old blue jeans, the same ones he wore when working in his garage at home. He looked in the mirror and smiled slightly. Today, he would teach his sons an important lesson about dignity and respect. "Get ready, boys," David called to James and William. "We're going for a drive." David drove his sons back to Royal Motorcycles in his old Ford car. The blue paint was faded, and there were small dents on the sides from years of use. Despite his success and wealth, David had kept this car because it reminded him of where he came from. He could afford any car he wanted, but he chose to drive something simple and practical. "Why are we going back, Dad?" William asked nervously. From the back seat, his stomach felt tight with worry. "What if they treat us badly again?" "Because running away from ignorance doesn't defeat it," David replied, looking at his son in the rearview mirror. "Sometimes you have to face it head-on. That's the only way things change." James felt nervous too. But what if they call the police or something? "They won't," David said calmly. "Trust me. Today, you learn something important about how the world really works." When they pulled into the parking lot, David parked his old Ford next to shiny new cars. The contrast was obvious. Other customers were getting out of expensive vehicles while the Thompson family stepped out of their humble car. David walked confidently toward the entrance, with his sons close behind him. The moment they entered the dealership, the same pattern began all over again. Staff members stopped their conversations and stared. The woman behind the counter whispered to her colleague, pointing in their direction just like yesterday. The same dismissive looks appeared on their faces, and people moved away as if the family might cause trouble. David walked calmly through the showroom, but this time he was the one asking questions. He stopped at different motorcycles and spoke knowledgeably about engines, performance, and technical features. His sons were amazed at how much their father knew about motorcycles. "This engine has excellent torque," David said. Examining a black motorcycle, the fuel injection system looks very advanced. But despite his obvious knowledge, the staff continued to treat him like any other customer they wanted to ignore. They gave short and friendly answers and avoided making eye contact. Some staff members even walked away when he approached them. These "Are beautiful machines," David said to a young salesperson named Helen. She had blonde hair and wore a blue uniform with the dealership logo. "How long has this business been operating?" 15 years, Helen replied curtly, barely looking at him. She seemed annoyed that he was taking up her time. "That's impressive," David said, smiling warmly. "Good businesses understand that every customer deserves respect, regardless of how they look or what they drive." Helen frowned at his comment, but said nothing. She walked away to help another customer who had just arrived in an expensive car. James and William watched their father handle the situation with amazing calm. They expected him to get angry, but instead he remained polite and friendly. He continued asking questions and showing genuine interest in the motorcycles. Then Robert, the manager from yesterday, noticed them. He approached with the same arrogant attitude, looking at David and the boys with obvious annoyance. His face showed that he remembered the boys from yesterday, and was not happy to see them back. "Sir, if you are not seriously interested in purchasing, I'll have to ask you to leave," Robert said rudely. "This is a business, not a museum." David smiled calmly and looked directly into Robert's eyes. "Actually, I am interested. Very interested. Could I speak with the owner, please?" Robert laughed in a mean way. "The owner doesn't have time for every person who walks in here. He's a busy man with important customers to serve. Please tell him David Thompson would like to speak with him," David said quietly, his voice remaining calm and polite. The name hit Robert like lightning. His face went completely pale, and his mouth opened slightly. He stammered something unclear about checking if the owner was available and hurried away toward the back offices. His confident attitude had disappeared completely. Within minutes, a man in an expensive dark suit rushed out of the back office. His face was filled with panic and deep regret. He looked like someone who had just realized he had made a terrible mistake. "Mr. Thompson," he said breathlessly, almost running toward them, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were here." The atmosphere in the showroom changed instantly. Staff members who had been ignoring them suddenly appeared with warm smiles and helpful attitudes. But David wasn't interested in their sudden change of heart. David Thompson looked at Thomas Mitchell, the owner of Royal Motorcycles, and spoke in a calm but serious voice. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to speak with you privately about something important." Thomas nodded quickly, his face still showing panic and embarrassment. He led David to a quiet corner of the showroom, away from the customers and staff. James and William stayed behind, watching nervously as their father walked away with the owner. They could see their father talking, but they could not hear what he was saying. "Mr. Mitchell," David began, his voice calm but firm. "Yesterday, your staff treated my sons with disrespect and cruelty. They judged them based on their appearance and age, not their character or intentions." Thomas looked deeply ashamed. His face was red, and he could not look directly at David. "Mr. Thompson, I sincerely apologize. This is not how we want to treat any customer. I am truly sorry for what happened." "I don't want apologies," David replied, shaking his head. "I want understanding. Do you realize how many potential customers you lose because of this attitude? How many young people you discourage from pursuing their dreams?" David explained that discrimination was not just morally wrong, but also bad for business. He told Thomas about unconscious bias, the automatic judgments people make without thinking. He spoke about the damage it causes to both victims and businesses. He shared statistics about diverse communities and their purchasing power. "When your staff judges people by their clothes or age, you lose customers," David continued. "You lose talented employees. You lose respect in the Community, this attitude hurts everyone. Thomas listened carefully. He had never thought about discrimination this way before. He realized that David was not just complaining about unfair treatment. He was teaching him something important about running a successful business. My sons came here yesterday with pure intentions. David continued. They wanted to learn about motorcycles to surprise their father. They had been saving their pocket money for weeks. Instead of learning about motorcycles, they learned that some people will judge them before knowing them. David's voice became softer, but more powerful. They learned that their excitement and good intentions meant nothing to your staff. They learned that kindness and respect are not always returned. That's a hard lesson for young people to learn. Thomas felt terrible as he listened. He thought about his own children and how he would feel if they were treated this way. He began to understand that this was not just about David Thompson being a wealthy customer. It was about basic human dignity and respect. What can I do to make this right? Thomas asked, his voice full of genuine concern. David's answer surprised everyone who might have been listening. I don't want special treatment for my family. I want better treatment for everyone. Train your staff to see people, not stereotypes. Create an environment where every customer feels welcome. Thomas was amazed by David's response. Most people in David's position would have demanded apologies, special treatment, or even revenge. But David was asking for something much more important. He wanted systemic change that would help everyone. Would you consider helping us with that? Thomas asked hopefully. I would be honored to have your guidance in making these changes. David thought for a moment. Looking across the showroom at his sons, they were watching him with trust and admiration. He knew this was a teaching moment not just for Thomas, but for James and William too. I'll do more than that, David said finally. I'll help you create a scholarship program for young people interested in automotive careers, and I'll invest in proper diversity training for your staff. James and William watched their father with growing pride. They had expected him to be angry, to demand punishment for the people who had hurt them. Instead, he was using his wealth and influence to create positive change. He was turning their painful experience into something that would help other young people. People remember how you make them feel, David told Thomas. Make sure they remember feeling respected and valued. When you treat people with dignity, they become loyal customers. They tell their friends and family about your business. They return again and again. Thomas nodded eagerly. I understand now. This isn't just about being nice. It's about being smart business people and decent human beings. Exactly, David replied. Success means nothing if we don't use it to lift others up. As they shook hands, Thomas felt grateful for the lesson he had learned. David had shown him that true leadership means turning problems into opportunities and pain into progress. The conversation would change not just the dealership, but Thomas's entire approach to business and life. 6 months had passed since the difficult day at Royal Motorcycles, and the dealership had transformed into a completely different place. The walls now displayed beautiful certificates from diversity training programs, showing the staff's commitment to treating all customers fairly. Colorful photos of scholarship recipients hung in frames, showing young people from many different backgrounds who were now pursuing their dreams in automotive careers. James and William had made a surprising decision during their summer holidays. They chose to work part-time at the same dealership where they had once been treated so poorly, but now they were there as valued employees, helping to train new staff members about treating all customers with respect and dignity. Remember, every person who walks through that door deserves your attention and kindness, James would tell new employees during training sessions. You never know who they are or what they might become. The most surprising change of all was in Robert. the manager who had been so cruel to them that first day. Through the training programs that David had helped create, Robert had genuinely learned and grown as a person. He had faced his own fears and prejudices, working hard to become better. Robert became an unexpected mentor to the Thompson boys, teaching them about motorcycle engines, maintenance, and sales techniques at the same time. He learned from them about respect, inclusion, and treating people fairly. The relationship that had started with such pain had grown into something beautiful. "I was wrong," Robert told them one afternoon as they worked together in the service area. "I let my own fears and prejudices control my actions. I judged you before knowing you. And that was completely unfair." He paused, looking directly at both boys. "I'm grateful for the chance to be better. Your father could have destroyed my career, but instead he gave me the opportunity to learn and grow." William smiled at Robert. "Everyone deserves a second chance. We're glad you took yours." The scholarship program that David had created had helped dozens of young people from diverse backgrounds pursue careers in automotive technology. Students from different races, economic backgrounds, and family situations now had opportunities they never would have had before. The program covered training costs, provided mentorship, and even helped with job placement. The dealership's business had actually improved significantly because word spread throughout the community. Out their welcoming environment, customers began choosing Royal motorcycles not just for their products, but because they felt respected and valued there. Sales increased, and the dealership became known as a place where everyone was treated fairly. On David's birthday, the whole Thompson family rode together on new motorcycles through the streets of Manchester. David had finally gotten the motorcycle he had always dreamed of, but this wasn't about showing off wealth or success. It was about celebrating the power of responding to hatred with love, ignorance with education, and discrimination with dignity. The four motorcycles moved in a line through the city streets, the sun shining on their helmets and the wind carrying the sound of their engines. Mary rode beside her husband, while James and William followed behind. They looked like any other family enjoying a beautiful day. But their journey had been about much more than just buying motorcycles. As they rode through Manchester's streets, James and William understood the lesson their father had taught them. True strength doesn't come from fighting back with anger or revenge. It comes from lifting others up and creating positive change. They had learned that the best way to defeat discrimination is not with more hatred, but with education, understanding, and love. They stopped for lunch at a small cafe in the city center, parking their motorcycles outside. As they sat at a table by the window, James looked at his father with deep respect and admiration. "Dad," James said, "thank you for showing us how to turn something painful into something beautiful. What happened to us that day hurt so much, but you helped us make it into something good." David smiled at his sons, feeling proud of the young men they were becoming. "Remember, boys, we don't just succeed for ourselves. We succeed so we can help others succeed too. That's what makes success meaningful." William nodded thoughtfully. "So when bad things happen to us, we can choose to use them to help other people." "Exactly," David replied. "Every challenge is an opportunity to make the world a little bit better." The story of the Thompson family spread throughout the community, inspiring other businesses to examine their own practices and other families to respond to discrimination with grace and wisdom. Their example showed that positive change is possible. When people choose love over hate, education over ignorance, and dignity over revenge. As they finished their lunch and prepared to ride home, the family knew that their journey had been about much more than motorcycles. It had been about the power of turning pain into purpose and using success to lift others up.